All right, Jennifer.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today, a deeper dive into the Connecticut Paid Family and Medical Leave. I am Jennifer Roberts. I head up our Employee Benefits Client Service area here at AssuredPartners New England. And if you want to flip to the next slide, Jessica, I know I see a lot of familiar names of clients and colleagues on the phone, but for those of you who we may have not have worked with in the past or just want to know a little more about AssuredPartners, I have some high-level information up on the screen here. So as you can see, we are the 11th largest broker in the U.S., and we're also the 6th largest on the property casualty side. And here within our New England region, we're headquartered out of the Hartford, Connecticut office, and we also have a large office in Shelton. So along with our Connecticut offices, we do have a presence in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, as well as New York. So we have a lot of local presence here. And what we do really is we're here to help with any insurance needs that you may have. We can do personal lines, meaning, automobile, homeowners. We can do business insurance, general liability, workers' comp. And then my team in employee benefits, we handle putting together benefits packages such as medical, dental, vision, life, disability insurance for your organization and your employees. So that's just a little bit about us. And for today, we thought this webinar would be very timely since the Connecticut paid family leave benefits will begin paying out on January 1st. And Andrea Barton-Reeves on the phone is the CEO of the authority. So we thought she'd be great. She's the expert in all things around this. So after the call, we'll reach out. We'll see if you have any other questions or things that we might be able to help with around this new program, as well as just your insurance needs in general. And thank you so much, Andrea, for being here today. And with that, I will kick it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. So as Jennifer and Jessica said, I'm Andrea Barton-Reeves. I am the CEO of Connecticut's Paid Leave Authority. Jennifer, I appreciate the kind words, but I am not the expert in all things that have to do with paid family and medical leave. There are 26 of us that work at the Paid Leave Authority. So, and Jessica is among, and Amber, whose picture you see that says Jessica, are among the many people that try to help to make the program successful. So with that said, let's just go ahead and get started. As Jessica mentioned, it's most effective if you could use the Q&A feature, and there will be plenty of time for questions after the presentation. So let me just go ahead and get started and do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we can go. Jessica, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
Okay. Let me just do a few things here. Okay. All right, now, just a little bit about me. I did start on March 2nd, which is probably about 7 to 10 days before the pandemic hit in the state. I came from a large nonprofit that supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. And today we'll talk about the Paid Leave Authority. We'll speak a bit about what FMLA is and compare it to what Connecticut Paid Family and Medical Leave is, because they are two different laws. We'll speak to the qualifying reasons for leave and the benefits that are available, eligibility, how the applications process will work, because as for some of you that were on earlier, we're at about 2,700 claims. So we do have a number of people who have navigated that process so far. We'll show you where you can find additional resources, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Very briefly, the Paid Leave Authority is responsible for administering the program, and we have 5 primary responsibilities. They include outreach and engagement. They also include developing the policies and procedures that are needed to run the program and establishing the trust fund contribution rate, which is 0.5% of FICA wages, and the receipt and accounting for those contributions. For those employers who are offering their own version of Connecticut paid leave, we do approve those private plans, and we're responsible for auditing them. And then finally, which is probably most important at this stage in our development, is the administration of claims for paid leave benefits, which we are doing with our partner, AFLAC. Some of the key dates for workers, or key dates in general, we know that employers began to withhold 0.5% of wages starting in January of this year. Starting on December 1st, those that were contributing, sole proprietors and self-employed individuals began submitting applications for benefits. I'm told that number right now is 2,815 claims. Those approved claims will be eligible to receive benefit payments starting in January, which is just a few weeks from now. Right. So a bit about the paid leave law itself. It does two things. It does have a statutory site, but I always refer to it as Public Act 1925, and it has two components. The first is that it established the paid family and medical leave process in general. It established the insurance authority, a trust fund, and expanded the paid leave benefit. And in terms of creating it not only did it create its existence, it also expanded the paid leave benefit to include sole proprietors and self-employed individuals who typically are not covered under family and medical leave. The second thing that it did is it changed Connecticut's existing family and medical leave law, which, and I'll have a chart that will compare it in more detail later, but it now expands family and medical leave to cover all employers that have one or more employees, with some exceptions to employer categories. It eliminates the hours worked requirement. So if you were working and you applied for family and medical leave today, you would have had to work 1,000 hours for your employer, and you would have had to have been there for 12 months. Those requirements have been changed for Connecticut's law. It now offers job protection after 3 months, and it does significantly expand the definition of covered family members for whom a person might take caregiver leave. It also permits employees and requires employers to allow an employee to keep up to 2 weeks of their paid time off to cover all or part of their time taken for FMLA. And it also expands the amount of time available for an additional 2 weeks of leave for incapacitation during pregnancy. So these are essentially the highlights of what's changed and what will happen next month when these changes in the law take effect. Who's covered by the paid leave program? A covered employer is an employer that has one or more employees that are working in the state, and that does include not-for-profit entities and private sector employers that have a unionized workforce. Those who are sole proprietors or self-employed individuals have the option to participate in the paid leave program, but if they do so, they have to remain in for a minimum of 3 years. Their contributions are 0.5% of their income, as they define it, and that, because some use revenue, some use income, others use different terms, but a sole proprietor, for example, who has employees, they may opt to be in the program for him or herself, but their employees, those individuals that work for them to whom they issue a W-2, they are considered employees under the statute. They must have a withholding of the 0.5%, and they have the option to access the benefit if they need it. Those not covered under the program, those that work for the federal government or the federal government in general, state of Connecticut employees are generally exempt except for those covered public employees. The same is true for municipalities or local or regional boards of education, unless they too have what are defined as covered public employees. Non-public elementary or secondary schools, also known as independent schools, there are quite a few in our state, have never participated in family and medical leave, and so therefore they are not part of the paid family and medical leave program. There are some other entities that are exempt from family and medical leave and paid leave, and that does include railroad workers. They essentially have their own version of this under federal law. Those are employed by governments of other states. We have a number of people who live in the state that work for universities, state universities for other states. The employees of sovereign nations, so the 2 tribes that run our casinos, both of those tribes are considered sovereign nations. They are not covered by either the state's FMLA or paid leave. A couple of other examples there: employees that are engaged in interstate commerce, they work in the state, they live in the other, they don't pay income tax in the state, or the spouses of active duty military members who are continuing to pay their taxes in their home state instead of where they're currently deployed, which could be Connecticut. What is a covered public employee? They are employees that are not unionized that work for the state of Connecticut. If they are unionized employees, they have the option of collectively bargaining to be included in the program. An employee of a municipality is considered a covered public employee if the unionized employees of the municipality choose to collectively bargain to be participants in the program. If they do so, then everyone that works for the municipality, it will be part of the program, whether they are in the union or not. And the same is true for those that work for local or regional boards of education. Again, if those collective bargaining units agree to participate, then everyone who works for that particular entity is now part of the paid leave program, whether they're in the union or not. You can see that municipality has a very broad definition. It includes those places that we normally think of, towns, cities, and boroughs and school districts, but it can also include a tourism district or a flood commission. How are the contributions managed? Let's walk through that just a little bit. The program is completely employee funded. There are no employer contributions to this particular program, which differs from programs in other states, even our neighboring state in Massachusetts. Employers hold 0.5%, which most employers have already been withholding. We still are encountering employers who did not understand that the program existed or that it applied to them. So we're working with them as well. And these have been remitted quarterly to the authority. Those contributions are post-tax with a cap of $142,800, which is currently this calendar year's Social Security contribution limit. Once those contributions are withheld, they are submitted to the Pay Leave Authority, and we do validate that information with wage data that we have available from a number of other state agencies. Those contributions are deposited into a paid leave trust fund that is managed by the Office of the Treasurer, and it's from that trust that the benefits are paid. Let me dive into just a little bit more into the changes that will be happening to the Connecticut Family and Medical Leave Act. As I mentioned earlier, our state has had family and medical leave since the mid-1990s. This isn't anything new. What's new is the paid leave component and some of the changes that will be happening to FMLA starting next year. Currently, our FMLA law looks like this. It applies to larger employers, 75 employees or more. And in order for an employee to have benefited from family and medical leave, which was unpaid, they had to have worked 1,000 hours in 12 months for that employer. And once they had done so, then they would be eligible for job protection, meaning the ability to get their exact job back when they return from FMLA. They would also get 16 weeks of leave in a 24-month period or 26 weeks of leave if they were caring for someone who was injured during active duty who was in the military. And an employer could require, and some had been requiring employees to use all of their accrued time off, whether it's in a pool of PTO, vacation, sick, personal leave, however it was defined. They could require an employee to exhaust all of their time off to cover the time they were away on FMLA so that they could be paid for all or part of the time they were out. Starting next year, the Family and Medical Leave Act will change considerably. As I mentioned earlier, the threshold for applicability will drop from 75 to 1 or more employees in a workplace. The hours worked requirement for eligibility will go away. And job protection, again, that ability to get your job back when you return, will attach at 3 months rather than 12. So rather than having a 16-week leave period in a 24-month period, we will be shifting to how the federal law works, which is 12 weeks in a 12-month period, and the 26 weeks of military caregiver leave will remain. If a woman is experiencing incapacitation during her pregnancy, there might be an additional 2 weeks of leave available if that's considered medically necessary by her healthcare provider. That incapacitation does not have to be related to the pregnancy. So if, for example, during the time that a woman is pregnant, she has a flare-up of a chronic health condition, and that causes her to be incapacitated as her healthcare provider defines that, then she may be able to avail herself of the additional 2 weeks during the time that she's pregnant. Finally, the other significant change here is that while an employer can continue to require an employee to use their accrued time off to provide some form of wage replacement for all or part of the time that they're away, they may no longer be permitted to exhaust that leave. They must be able to keep up to 2 weeks of their accrued paid time off. Now, I'll tell you that this particular part of the law came into being based on testimony that many people gave, that once they took time for FMLA and their employer asked them or required them to use whatever kind of PTO sick that they had, they would exhaust it, and then a significant family event would happen, a dream vacation, a wedding, a graduation, and the person either had to attend that event with no pay because they had exhausted all of their leave, or they were not able to go at all. So when you are asking yourselves as employers, where should I permit that 2-week bucket to remain? That's guidance that you can use to help make that determination. A bit about the Connecticut Paid Leave Act itself and the law. So we use CTPL, and it stands for the law itself, the program, and the Paid Leave Authority, the agency that administers the program. It is strictly a source of income replacement. It does not provide job protected leave. The job protected leave is available under the Family and Medical Leave Act itself. And we also refer to it as PFML, or Paid Family and Medical Leave. There are qualifying reasons, and those reasons are these: medical leave, which is also known as taking leave for your own serious health condition, and that can include serving as an organ or bone marrow donor, and pregnancy is also considered a serious health condition as well. We do have a number of claims that have come in for this type of leave, which is bonding leave. So once your baby is born or a child has been placed in your home for adoption or foster care, there is a period of up to 12 weeks of leave that you can take to bond, which is to form that emotional or physical attachment between you and the child that has come into your family. In addition, 12 weeks is available for caregiver leave, and that is leave that can be taken by a worker to provide either physical or psychological comfort or care to a family member who is experiencing a very serious health condition or a serious health condition. Our population in our state is aging, so we are really seeing an increase in the number of people who are applying for caregiver leave to care for family members who are aging or ill. Family violence leave is also available under the paid leave law. Family violence is not necessarily covered under family and medical leave, but if a person is experiencing family violence, they are eligible to apply for up to 12 days of paid leave benefits in order to address the issues related to family violence, some of which you can see here: to seek medical or psychological care, to relocate, to attend court, obtain services from a victim services organization. And there are 2 types of military leave that are available for FMLA and for paid leave benefits as well. They are known as qualifying exigency leave. These are all worker leave. So workers can take this leave in order to engage in certain activities that arise when a spouse or a child or a parent has been deployed overseas. They've been called to active duty. And then there's military caregiver leave. For those who served our country who have been injured during active duty, a family member can take leave to take care of that person. In both of these types of leave, they can take up to 26 weeks, but only 12 of those weeks will be paid. So just a special note again about the family violence leave. It is not necessarily a family and medical leave qualifying reason, but it is eligible for paid leave, and a person is entitled to take this leave under Connecticut's Family and Family Violence Leave Act. The leave is limited to 12 days, not 12 weeks. And as we see here today, it is not a federal FMLA qualifying reason. Okay. So let's take just a little bit of time to talk about the expansion of the definition of caregiver leave. If you were to take FMLA today, you could take it for a parent, a spouse, or a son or a daughter who's under 18, or if they're over 18, there have to be a person with a disability. Connecticut has a bit more of an expansive law and allows you to take time off for the care of in-laws. Starting next month, there will be an even more expansive definition of family for whom a person may take family and medical leave and seek a paid leave benefit. And they include all of the categories of family that you see here, including someone who is related by affinity to the employee. So the son or daughter can be of any age. It also now includes siblings and grandparents and grandchildren, because we know that families come in many different forms. And what exactly is related by affinity? It is any person with whom the employee has a significant personal bond that's like family, those that are listed in the statute. We have a couple of examples here. Let's say there's an aunt or an uncle who relies on that staff person, the worker, for unpaid care, and they've had a long-standing relationship. So, for example, and I often use this example myself, I have 3 godchildren. They're wonderful people. If I'm thinking if something were to happen to me and I required care, they may be able to prove that I am like a grandparent to them, as an example. Or we often have couples that have lived together for significant periods of time. They are in a spouse-like relationship. They do not have a marriage certificate or a marriage license, but they would still like the opportunity to take time off to care for one another. And Related by Affinity would allow them to expand that definition of family and take time off to care for their loved one. Let's talk a bit about the eligibility for taking time and for income replacement benefits under the law. Federal family and medical leave continues to apply to employers that have 50 or more employees, and the rules around federal FMLA have not changed. You still have to have 12 months of employment with the employer, and you have to have worked 1,250 hours in the months immediately, not months, the months immediately preceding the leave. That rule hasn't changed, and as we sit here today, there is no federal corollary for paid leave at the moment. For job protected leave, I had mentioned this again, it starts next month, 3 months with the employer to enjoy job protected leave with no hours worked requirement. But in order to seek income replacement from the paid leave authority, there are some thresholds. The person has to earn at least $2,325 in the highest earning quarter of those 4 of the 5 completed quarters before the time they apply for leave. So that's a 15-month period, and we will be looking for a consistent 23-25 in one of those 3-month periods, one of those quarters. You also have to be currently employed when you're applying for leave, or if you are unemployed, you have no more than a 12-week window from your employment with a covered employer in order for you to apply for benefit. If you're a sole proprietor or a self-employed individual, certainly you may participate in the program. There will be at least a 3-month requirement of contributions, and there is a residency requirement for sole proprietors and self-employed individuals. They must live in the state. That is not necessarily true for Connecticut employees, but it is true for sole proprietors and self-employed individuals. The length of leave I'd referred to earlier, federal remains the same. You get 12 weeks in a 12-month period, and you're 26 weeks for military caregiver leave. The job protected leave under family and medical leave is now, you can see, is a parallel to federal. 12 weeks in a 12-month period, 26 weeks for caregiver leave, 12 days for family violence, possible 2 additional weeks for incapacitation during pregnancy. These same reasons that you can take job protected leave are applicable to applying for a benefit for wage replacement at the paid leave authority. How exactly does one do that? We began accepting applications on December 1st for absences happening on or after January 1. A question we often get is, well, what happens if I already had what would be a qualifying event in December and it bridges over what we call in-flight claims into January? You can still apply for the leave for the remainder, excuse me, of the time that you have available in that leave. You do not get a whole new tranche of leave. You get whatever is left of your leave based on the way in which your employer rolls back your family and medical leave. At the Paid Leave Authority, we use the rolling back period for 12 months, and it's the only counting period that we use. So if you've already had 8 weeks of leave, that let's say we're already in 2022 and you've used 8 weeks of leave, and you come to us in 2023 and you say, you know what, I want more. If you've already used up your 8 weeks, you're only going to have 4 in the following year. The fastest and easiest way to apply for benefits is to really encourage people to go to the online portal. And there you can create a secure identity, and you can do all of the things that we have bulleted here. You can upload documents, you can message a case manager, you can view any messages that come from AFLAC. All of that can be done through the portal, or you can also call too. Excuse me. There will be leave available for 3 different types of leave. The block leave, which is what we traditionally think of as the continuous time of absence for a single qualifying reason. Then we know that some workers will be using what's known as reduced schedule leave. They normally work 40 hours a week, but for a period of time, they'll be working 25 hours a week. So they'll move from their defined full-time to part-time schedule. I just use it as an example. If their regular hours worked are 25 hours and they're taking leave and now they have to go down to 15, that is also considered a reduced schedule that may be eligible for wage replacement. And finally, there's intermittent leave, and that is the type of leave where it's taken usually not consecutively, it's not always predictable. Let's say a person has a chronic health condition like migraines or colitis, and you don't really know when you're going to experience the symptoms of those particular disorders or conditions. They may have to use their leave intermittently. And that is covered by the paid leave law as well. And it's also covered by family and medical leave. The application process for paid leave benefits is pretty simple, and it falls on the worker who is seeking the benefit. The role that the employer plays is completing what's known as an employment verification form, where we would ask you, does the person work there? Do they have any access to any other paid leave benefit? Will you be paying first or will we be paying first? Because sometimes the employer is the payer of last resort, but there are times when the employer may require the person to use some of their PTO to avoid what's known as stacking, which is a person taking leave under federal leave for one reason, Connecticut FMLA for another reason, and then pay leave for a third reason, and ending up with what could be 26 weeks of leave if they are storing or reserving their PTO. So that's a reason why some employers do require people to use as much of their PTO as possible, knowing that they get to reserve the 2 weeks for themselves. Now, the worker is responsible for submitting their claim to AFLAC and providing all of the information that they need. You'll see there on the far left that I did mention that employer verification form, which has to be completed by the employer and then returned. Either the employer can return it or the employee can return it. Once we have all of the documentation, and AFLAC will assign a case manager to the worker to help them work through the process. If everything is returned and all is well, and they qualify and they're approved, AFLAC does the calculation benefit amount. And that all depends on what the person's wage level is. If they're earning minimum wage, they will get 95% of their typical weekly earnings. If they earn a bit more than that, there's a slightly different calculation, but under no circumstances does anyone get more than 60 times the prevailing minimum wage, which right now is $13 an hour, so the maximum benefit is $780 a week. The benefit payments are issued either directly to a bank account or through what we call a stored value card, which is a Visa debit card. And right now they will be made 2 weeks in arrears. We may close that window a bit, but there will be some delay from the time that the person's benefits are approved to the time that they get it. We have a small example there of how that might work. If a person is interested, if you have workers that come to you and they say, I don't really know how much I'm going to get paid, if they go to the employee section of our website, there is a benefits estimator that is there. And we call it an estimator rather than a calculator because it is a very rough estimate of what might be received. There are a number of factors that impact the amount of money that a person may receive in a benefit, whether they're working for a municipality and a private employer at the same time. So they're working for a covered employer and a non-covered employer, if they're working 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week. So this is just simply an idea of how much a person might make. You can see here, we have worker A who's earning minimum wage. They put in their minimum wage and you can see their benefit amount is $494 a week. Worker B earns a bit more. And we use here that benefit calculation, which you can see is slightly more complicated. But when they put in their $600, they end up with the $542 a week in benefits. Often we get the question, well, my workplace offers its own form of paid leave. It offers short-term disability. That's really the question we get the most. And how do these things work together? So I'll walk through a few scenarios for you. And the first one on the far left, the person doesn't receive any employer-provided PTO. Let's assume even though they've worked there for 3 months, they probably haven't earned any or certainly not enough to cover the time that they've been away. And in that case, they can come to the paid leave authority and apply for the full period of their leave for wage replacement. If, for example, they do have PTO and it covers all of their wages for the time that they'll be out, and their employer says, you really need to use that to avoid the stacking that I spoke of earlier, then that person would not be eligible to receive any paid leave benefits for the time that they are out. The third suggests that a worker receives some portion of PTO, but it's less than their regular pay while they're out on leave. And we do have some employers that have this policy. So what will happen is that the worker can still get the paid leave benefit when their leave begins, but we would reduce the amount to make sure that their compensation does not exceed 100%. And that's part of the question, the information that we gather and the questions that we ask you to answer as employers on the employer verification form. And finally, the fourth scenario is one where it's really more one that suggests that the person is taking blocks of time and blocks of leave. So let's say that the worker does have employer provided PTO and it's the full pay, but it's only for a portion of the time that they're out. So let's say a worker has 5 weeks of PTO and they're going to be out for 8 weeks. Knowing that they must be permitted to keep 2, they will take those first 3 weeks of their time away on FMLA using their 3 weeks of PTO and then coming to the paid leave authority to seek the wage replacement for the remaining 5 weeks that they're out. Now, they may get full pay for those first 3 weeks because they're using all of their PTO. And then for the remainder of the time, let's say they get the maximum of the $780 a week, then they could go to the employer, and if the employer has means by which they can bring them up to 100%, something less than that, depending what's available, the employee and the employer still have the option of doing that as well, as long as their full compensation does not exceed 100% of what they would normally receive in pay. Okay. Now, there are some things, my slide deck is all over the place, that workers should know. They are still required to inform the employee about how the time off should be used. So you as employers, you should let the employee know whether they're required or permitted to use the employer provided paid time off while they're out on leave. And all of the rules that apply to how their time can be used while they're out on FMLA. And again, as I mentioned, if they have short-term disability that they've elected to participate in, that we have to know, is the short-term disability policy the payer of last resort? Do you have to come to the paid leave authority first and exhaust those benefits, and how does that work? And then how much exactly do you get? So they can be fully informed as to how to manage their benefits so they don't exceed that 100%. And they do that in partnership with their employer. Now, a worker in applying for paid leave, they, as I said, they are responsible for initiating the process. They go online if they want to, or they can call. And if they go online, they're going to create a secure account first with at ctpaidleave.org. They will get a case manager. Once they've done that, that will walk them through the process of all of the documentation they are required to return in order to have their claim reviewed and approved or administered. And then finally, it is the worker's responsibility to notify AFLAC and their employer of any changes to their leave, whether it's going to be longer or shorter, or they're going to come back to work sooner than they anticipated. All of these things are the responsibility of the worker to communicate. A little bit about how FMLA works, if you're not familiar with this, and I'm going to spend very little time on this because it really is the purview of the Department of Labor, but I also know it's very new for some employers because the threshold is dropped from 75 to 1 in terms of who is now covered by Connecticut's FMLA. It's the employee's responsibility to let the employer know that they need to take the time off. They don't have to come into your office and say, I'm having surgery, I need FMLA. That should trigger, if they come in and say I have surgery, that should trigger that it's probably covered by FMLA. Once they've done that, you the employer have 5 days to let them know whether the reason that they've given you for needing FMLA time off is probably a viable reason, and what more you need in order to make a determination. That's usually a medical certification, military documents, whatever it might be. You need to give them 15 days to do that. If they can't get the paperwork to you in 15 days or the proof, then you can give them another 15 days. Once you get everything back as an employer, you have 5 days to notify them of your decision as to whether or not the leave that they want to take is covered by FMLA and all of the rules that cover that. The employer is required to track that leave. If they're also getting paid leave at the same time, we will be tracking that leave. The employee is responsible, as I said, for informing the employer of any changes to that, and the employers, because it's job protected after 3 months, must return the employee to their job with the same schedule, pay, and conditions. Okay. So let's just remember a few things, that even when the employee is approved for Connecticut or federal FMLA, they're still responsible for following all of the rules and bringing to you the appropriate documentation that you need, and they are responsible for doing the same thing at the Pay Leave Authority. There might also be some other laws that apply and offer job protection, so family medical leave might not be the only one. And in all circumstances, it is the employer's right and responsibility to designate FMLA time off as such. A person may come to you and say, I know I only get 12 weeks of family and medical leave, and so I'm just going to deal with it these 3 weeks that I'm going to be out, and I don't want you to designate this time off that I'm taking off for major surgery as FMLA. That is not an option that is available to the employer or the employee. It can really come back to haunt you, particularly if there are job performance issues and that time is not protected under the job protections portion of the statute, provision of the statute, I should say. So I know I've covered a lot and we started a little late, so I'm going to wrap up now and just say there are resources that are available for workers under the employee section of the website. And like I said, there's lots of information that's available there. And for employers, we have just a ton of information. All of these forms that you see here are all downloadable and shareable. If you want to know more about how to administer the paid leave program itself and learn more about family and medical leave, you can use the Human Resources Toolkit. Even if you are not the human resources person, that is still there. The Employer Toolkit is more of a comprehensive guide to everything Connecticut paid leave. To give information to your employees about how the paid leave benefit works and what's offered, you can use the rights poster, the RAC card, or the fact sheet, which are all the same. They just offer it in different forms because we know people learn differently. So that's what those are. And we are here to help. We do not have a call center, but if you use the Contact Us feature on the portal, if you're a small business, if you have 74 or fewer employees, we do have a couple of people who can answer your questions specifically for you. So when you go to the Contact Us feature, you can pull that down and submit your question. And we do have a lot of frequently asked questions and helpful videos on our site as well. I will stop sharing and come back on camera and answer some questions. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. There's just a couple of open questions. One is whether or not the benefit is taxable.
Mm-hmm. The benefit is taxable, but the person receiving the benefit by statute has the option to determine whether they'd like taxes withheld or not.
Thank you. The next question is whether bonding leave is in addition to medical leave for giving birth.
All right, this question is a little more complex. When you are taking, if you're taking pregnancy leave, the pregnancy leave and the bonding leave are usually kind of taken in one big block together. If you've already had the baby and there's a break, and then you'd like to come back and take additional weeks for bonding leave, then they don't necessarily run together. And we have a number of families for whom this is true. Then it's the pregnancy leave, serious health condition, and then remaining weeks for bonding leave.
Thank you. Someone asked if there are any sample policies that can be used as a template when updating or creating a policy.
Right. We don't have any sample policies that we can provide you. We know that the Small Business Development Center is offering some training on policies, but we don't necessarily have them. And the Department of Labor may have some policies as well, but we don't have any, no.
And just to let everyone know, if you did not see it, I put both the link to the Connecticut Paid Leave website and the link to the portion of the DOL website that has some updated FMLA guidance in the chat. The next question is, Cheryl says, we give each employee 8.08 hours off every 2 weeks. However, historically, when the employee is on leave, either paid or unpaid, we have not continued to grant additional PTO. Will we now be required to grant PTO when someone is on leave?
No, so this law is not going to require you to change your accrual policy, your PTO policy, none of that. It just really assumes that if a person has accrued PTO, that they should be permitted to keep, and have to actually by law, keep 2 weeks of that. If they haven't accrued 2 weeks, you don't need to change your policy to give them enough so that they can accrue 2 weeks in order to keep it. That's not how the policy works. So you're not required to do that.
Okay, thank you. The next question, if the company offers a short-term disability policy, can the employee still go to the state first before the company reviews how much of a benefit they will receive from the state, so we can then coordinate the payment, company making up the difference?
So yes, you can, but it all depends on the terms and conditions of your short-term disability policy. Some of the policies for some employers require that state benefits or other employer provided benefits be exhausted first before they will pay under the short-term disability policy. And others allow the policies to be used concurrently with other types of benefits. So not knowing what your specific policy says, I can't really tell you, but what in the scenario as you have just outlined it for me, yes, that is possible. You could do that as long as a person doesn't receive more than 100% of their weekly earnings.
Okay, the next question is bonding leave just given at the amount requested by the employee, or is it reviewed by a person at FMLA? I have 3 employees whose wives are having a baby this year.
So the bonding leave is based on the request that's made. Knowing that a person only has 12 weeks in a 12-month period, if they use all of their paid time off, right? If they use all of their accrued paid family and medical leave for bonding, then that will leave them without anything in terms of paid family and medical leave for the next 11 to 12 months, depending on how much they've taken. But we don't necessarily say to the person, we think you should only get 3 weeks of bonding instead of 8. That's a determination. If they want to take the 8, they're entitled to the 8, understanding that they're exhausting a good chunk of their leave should they need it for something else.
And the last open question is, what if staff only have 2 weeks of PTO left when they request FMLA?
You must allow them to keep it, and then they can come to the paid leave authority to receive some sort of income replacement. They can apply for that, but you can't compel them to use that. They are entitled to keep all of that.
Okay. And a related question, we have both PTO and medical time. Is the rule to offer to keep 2 weeks minimum, does the rule apply only to PTO, or is it a combination of both buckets?
It can be a combination of both buckets. But as I mentioned during the course of the presentation, the primary purpose for that provision in the statute is to allow people to have time that they can actually take in the form of vacation, primarily. But if you choose to have 1 week of vacation or PTO and then 1 week of medical leave, as long as they have 2 weeks of time that they can take away from work, that combination is up to the employer. Some employers are saying to people, if you have a bucket of sick time and a bucket of vacation time and a bucket of personal leave, we're going to require you to exhaust your sick leave and exhaust your personal leave, and then you can go into your vacation leave up to the point where you hold back that 2 weeks. But every employer has been different. But you can indeed do that.
Okay. Another question that just came in. Since the employee is paying for this benefit through payroll deduction, why is the benefit taxable?
The benefit is taxable because according to the IRS, it is considered income to them. So that's why it's taxable. They have the ability to either not have the tax withheld and we will issue them a 1099, or they can have the tax withheld and then obviously we would issue them the appropriate paperwork. But the IRS and the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services have been very clear. This benefit is considered a form of income upon which taxes are payable.
Okay. Another question. So an employee can be out for 26 weeks in a 12-month period for pregnancy, 2 weeks for issues, and 12 weeks for bonding.
No. No. So the 26 weeks only applies to qualifying exigency leave and military caregiver leave. So you could take that time off. The way a person could get more leave, not all of it may be paid, is if they're taking federal FMLA for a reason, it's covered under FMLA, and then they take leave under Connecticut FMLA for a different reason than they were taken for federal. And then there's some other kind of leave that some employers may offer, which some do. That, under those circumstances, you could have a person that could be out for 26 weeks or longer. And there have been some circumstances, even prior to the paid leave benefit, where that has actually happened, because the reasons for federal leave and state leave sometimes are different. It's going to be even more challenging now, because when you had a year of time that you had to work and essentially the same number of hours that you had to work in order to access family and medical leave, you could run federal and state leave concurrently. But now that there's such a significant difference between the federal leave and the state leave, it's going to be more challenging to run those two concurrently so that you don't have the stacking, which is why some employers are now insisting that the person really use almost all of their other kinds of time so that they can't store it up and then use it for different reasons. So no, you don't get 26 weeks. You'll get your pregnancy leave and your bonding leave, and that's 12 weeks all together. And if you use that in your 12-month period, then you don't have any leave left under Connecticut FMLA, unless you have a reason under federal that you could take more job protected leave, but you wouldn't be eligible for any income replacement.
The next question is, do you have to offer federal FMLA and Connecticut FMLA if you have less than 50 employees, or just Connecticut FMLA?
All right, so this is an interesting question. The federal FMLA, and we're going to go back and answer the federal FMLA rules, and I would definitely check with the Department of Labor. They apply if you have 50 or more employees, but it doesn't have to be continuous. So if you have 50 or more employees for, let's say, a season or a specific window, and I would definitely go to the federal DOL website and check that rule. But it is definitely true. If you have them for a specific period of time, then you could be considered covered under that law. And so then, yes, you'd have to offer federal and state FMLA to your employees if, in fact, you're triggered by that particular law. Okay. Jessica, did I answer that full question? Because I feel there was more to that.
No, that was the full question.
Okay. All right. So I just saw something come up. Somebody said they needed to know the difference between the two.
Yes, that just came into the chat.
Okay. Can you read it to me?
Sure. I'm sorry. It
Okay.
says that she missed the difference between Connecticut paid leave and Connecticut FMLA. Can that be reviewed again quickly?
All right. So this is, you know what, I'm going to try to find this slide. I'm not guaranteeing that I can in the time that we have remaining, but I will certainly look for it, because there's a way to think about this that I think would probably make it a bit easier. And that is, when a person comes into your office and asks for family and medical leave, you are asking yourself really two questions. You're asking whether or not the person is eligible for family and medical leave for the reasons that highlighted. And if they are, then how are they going to get paid while they're out? That's really the question you want to ask yourself. And so if you think about it in that context, then it might be a little less confusing, because they're not really different programs. What it is it's income replacement for time that's being taken for family and medical leave. That's really what the difference is. So you don't want to think about them separately, because that is what can cause enormous amounts of confusion. Now that law, the threshold for the application of family medical leave has dropped from 75 to 1, this is an inquiry that a lot of employers have never had to engage in before, because they've never been big enough to have FMLA at the state or federal level apply to them. But the first thing you want to do is think about when somebody comes in and says, hey, I just found out that I need to have surgery, knee surgery, and I'm going to be out for 5 weeks. That's probably an FMLA qualifying reason because that's probably a serious health condition. Now we're going to figure out how are you going to get paid for the 5 weeks that you're out. You have short-term disability, you've got PTO, you've got a medical bank, and you also have family and medical leave, paid family medical leave benefit that you can get from the paid leave authority. So now you're going to sit down and figure out how does all of that work together? What do you want to do? Do you want to have them use their medical leave to avoid the stacking that I spoke of? Because here's what happens with stacking. Let's say you have a medical bank and they've got these 12 weeks that they can take for family medical leave. They're going to use 3 weeks to go out. Let's just use a different example. 3 weeks to go out for a serious health condition. And so now they've got time that's remaining. Now they're going to use their medical bank and they're going to go out again, but they're not using their family and medical, they're not using their paid leave benefit, and they still have 9 more weeks of paid leave benefit. Now they're going to go out again for a different reason, and they're going to use another 6 weeks of their Connecticut paid leave. But now they still have medical left. So now they're going to go out again and use their medical. And that is how you end up with the stacking, where you have people that could conceivably be out for a very long time. That's why some employers are saying, no. If you're going to go out on family medical leave, you're going to exhaust your medical first, and then you're going to use the other one. And then once and that'll be wage replacement for you. And then if you still don't have enough, you can go to the paid leave authority. If they go first, and that's why we ask you that question in the employment verification form. If they come to us first, then we're going to keep track of that so that you don't end up with that stacking. But it can happen. And you can have a person end up being out for a very long period of time by combining all of these benefits. And then you have, really critical to your workforce out for half the year because of the combining of the different benefits.
Thank you, Andrea. We have a couple more questions that have come in. One is,
okay.
An employee had a baby in 2021 and used 16 weeks under federal FMLA. They are requesting to use 12 weeks for Connecticut paid leave for bonding in 2022. Is this allowable?
Yes, it is, because it's a completely different leave reason.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As an employer, am I still responsible for paying the payroll taxes on the employee's benefit, FICA, Social Security, as I am with their private short-term disability benefits?
I have to say, I don't think we've ever gotten that question before. And the answer is, whatever taxes are payable on their paid leave benefit that they receive is the responsibility of the worker. That is not your responsibility. The question that we do get more often than not is, am I required to continue their health insurance or dental insurance or whatever other kinds of benefits that I have my employer responsibility for and they have the employee responsibility for? And the practical answer is, under state law, you are not required to do that. But most employers do, because it is such a hassle to have somebody come off of it and have them come back on again. And they're in an eligibility period, outside of an eligibility period. It's just crazy making. So some employers do decide, you know what, I'm going to bill them and they're going to pay for it. And even if they don't pay for it, I'm going to, then when they get back, I'm going to get permission from the Department of Labor to deduct what they hadn't paid, which is something that you can do. And some employers do that, but no, you're not responsible for withholding those taxes from their benefit payment. That's their responsibility.
Okay. How does it work when an employee gives little to no notice that they need FMLA time? Can we ask them to use their PTO while we are going through the approval process of Connecticut FMLA?
So yes, you can, carefully, right? Because you don't want to get yourself into trouble in the approval process, because that can be construed as retaliation or discrimination. But if they are required under the statute, especially starting next year, to give you 30 days notice if it's foreseeable and as soon as practicable if it's not. And if they haven't given you the 30 days notice, you do have the right to say, no, you needed to give us 30 days notice. And then you can delay that until until you're within that 30-day window. Practically, most employers don't do that. They don't. And it's annoying and frustrating when employees just sort of show up and say, hey, my surgery's next week. That, they should not be doing that. It's very frustrating. It does put employers in a very difficult position, but they are supposed to give you 30 days notice.
Okay. Cheryl asked, the burden seems to be on employers to identify the situations where an employee is eligible for FMLA. What if someone calls out for one day for asthma or a migraine? Do we have to offer FMLA or must the absence be longer?
No, so if you have approved them for FMLA and it's an intermittent leave for the specific condition that they're calling for, then yes, when they call in and say, I'm out today or I'll be out this morning because I have a migraine, you have the right to say, are you calling out based on your FMLA leave? They can't just say, I'm not coming in today because I don't feel well. That's a different story. That's sick leave. And that can be an issue that can become a disciplinary issue, or it can become an attendance issue if it's not related to family and medical leave. But if they have submitted all of the paperwork and you've approved their family and medical leave for that specific condition, and they call and say, I'm out because of a migraine and it's FMLA, then yes, you do have to give them that time. You do. But understand again, it's within the windows and the rules that you've applied to taking time off in your workplace. If you say you need to call within a 2-hour window because someone else has to cover your shift, or you need to be here, or you need to give me 5 hours, whatever those rules are, those still apply. Those don't go away because it's FMLA. They still need to do that. That's why in the slide I showed you, said, make sure you tell them what the rules are, because that's really critical.
Okay, just 2 more open questions. One is, under what situation could someone get 12 weeks of federal FMLA and Connecticut FMLA in 52 weeks?
Okay, that was a little, I don't know if we have time to answer that one, but I'll try. But I saw one pop up that said, let's see, I think it was Wayne. Was it Wayne? Hang on, because I think it came in simultaneously. Nope, now I don't see it. I don't know if you put it in the chat or not. Oh, Wade, see, that's why you got to use the Q&A, because I lost track of you. All right. Wouldn't that example fall under the paid leave as well? So you're talking about the example that I just gave under for intermittent leave? Yeah, so if the person, if they are receiving intermittent leave, they've applied for a paid leave benefit, yes, they're required to call in. We actually have a different reporting mechanism, a much more frequent reporting mechanism for your intermittent leave for paid leave as well, because we're keeping track of that. All right, so under what situation could someone get 12 weeks of federal and 12 weeks of FMLA in a 12-month period? If they're taking the leave for different reasons, okay, so let's say, I'm just going to use this example. Let's say that they're taking leave for a serious health condition under federal FMLA, and then they're taking bonding leave under Connecticut FMLA. They could get up to 24 weeks of leave in that period because they're taking it for 2 different reasons, one of which is covered under the Connecticut statute and one of which is covered under the federal statute. That's how it would work.
Okay, and then this is going back to the question you just answered about intermittent leave, and she said she was talking about someone who has not asked for leave. If they call out for the day, do we need to tell them about FMLA?
So no, if they have called out for the day, you do not have to tell them about FMLA, but I will tell you from my experience of having run HR for a large employer, if you see a pattern developing, you should talk to them about FMLA. And I just wouldn't kind of let that go, because here's what can happen. A person does not have to say, I need FMLA in order for it to be covered by FMLA. So if you see that they're out for the same migraine, chronic health condition over and over again, and now it's becoming a disciplinary issue because their attendance is bad, you should talk to them about FMLA. And if they choose not to avail themselves of FMLA, that you can go down that attendance path, however that works in your organization. That's what I would tell you. Okay, thank you, Wade. Appreciate that. Did I miss a question?
There's just one more. Oh, nope. No, and as soon as you answer one, another comes in. So there's one more about the taxability. And Linda said she understands income is taxable. However, when purchasing short or long-term insurance, if the employee pays for the insurance, the benefit is not taxable. It is taxable if the employer pays the premium. In this case, the employee is paying for the coverage, so it doesn't make sense that it is taxable.
Are you talking about their benefit? Because I'm not sure how the taxability works when it comes to short-term disability or long-term disability. I am talking strictly about the paid leave benefit. That the statute says that their benefit is income to them, right? And that's based on feedback or guidance, I should say, that we receive from the Department of Revenue Services. It's definitely income to them. And the statute says they have the option of whether or not that benefit is taxable or not taxable. And that's probably, I'm just repeating the same answer because I don't have a specific answer to the question that you've posed. But with respect to the short-term or disability benefit, but as it relates to the paid leave benefit, that's how the law is applied.
All right, and the very last one, if we had an employee who routinely did not follow the call-out rules through intermittent leave, would the employer be able to terminate the person with cause?
Oh my goodness. Okay, that is so much more complicated than we have time for here today, but here's what I would tell you, that if you have a collective bargaining agreement, you need to follow that, or else you don't want to end up in front of the NLRB with or you can manage the grievance process, but those usually end up at the NLRB. They can also end up at the CHRO, the Connecticut Department of Human Rights and Opportunities, Commission for Human Rights and Opportunities. So you really, when it comes to job protected leave, you need to move carefully, very carefully, and with legal or HR advice. Because even if a person is not following their intermittent leave policy, you can talk to them about that and you can tell them, here's the other thing that you can do as an employer. And I'm not offering you legal advice. I'm just saying to you, this is one of the things you can do. If you find that an attendance pattern with approved FMLA is not matching what's on the medical certification, you can issue what's known as a recertification, which is essentially printing the entire or taking the entire attendance policy during the period that the person has had approved FMLA and matching it up against the approved time that they should have been off based on their medical certification, telling that and putting it together with a letter that says to that person, these two things don't match. Your doctor said you were supposed to be out once a week for the last 3 months for chronic headaches. You've been out 4 times a week for chronic headaches and other things that have nothing to do with your FMLA. So now we're going to ask you to go back and get a recertification from that provider that says that your attendance pattern has changed and that the change in your attendance pattern is now consonant or inconsonant with your medical certification, or get a new medical certification, or get a second opinion or a third opinion, all of which are available to you, which is why it's really important to talk to the Department of Labor, because they can walk you through what your rights are as an employer when you don't see any kind of congruence between the person's absence pattern and what their medical certification says. I will tell you from my own experience that recertifications are Lazarus moments, meaning you will see a person all of a sudden just get well, they'll come to work, right? Because now you're really questioning why they're gone. And some people really have experienced an increased chronicity in their health experience, in their health, just in their health in general, I should say. And they do need to get a recertification because things have gotten worse. And I've had that experience too. So just be careful. Use your employment lawyer if you have one. If you don't, then use your HR, but make sure that you do this carefully because you can really fall into a trap of discrimination and retaliation through disciplinary action and termination if a person has job protection under FMLA. And I think, Jennifer, I think I'm done because
Yes.
now I'm going to go into my employment lawyer mode, and I'm just
I get it. Well,
right.
This has been extremely valuable, and we appreciate your time and going over time, and this has been great. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Very, very welcome.
Yes.
It's our pleasure. We wish everyone a wonderful holiday season, however you celebrate that, and we're here to help.
Absolutely. And for our clients on the line, if you guys have questions after this, reach out to, any of us, and we'll do what we can to dig in and get you in touch with the appropriate people to answer your questions. So I echo your holiday greetings to everybody. Nice seeing some of you on today, and thank you again.
When is the next training by Andrea? Whenever, thank you for that. Whenever AssuredPartners wants us back, we'll be happy to do it. We pride ourselves in making ourselves available to our constituents because we know this is challenging. We know it's a huge change, and we just really, Jessica will tell you, our motto at the Paid Leave Authority is we're here to help.
Great. We
Okay.
might take you up on that, so be careful what you offer.
Not a problem at all.
All right.
Everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.